What would you do if 2 fake cops walked into your backyard and demanded you prove you lived in your own home? Anthony Greer had worked his entire life for this moment. At 44 years old, he finally had the kind of home he once only drove past in his 20s, staring through tinted car windows and wondering what it would feel like to belong there. His estate sat on the edge of Lake Norman in North Carolina, where million-dollar homes lined the water with private docks and carefully landscaped yards. For Anthony, though, the jewel wasn't the dock or the sweeping view of the lake. It was the pool in his backyard. On a Saturday afternoon, the sun beat down on the turquoise water, and Anthony let himself sink into the silence. He wasn't wearing a business suit, wasn't holding a phone with numbers flashing across the screen, wasn't in a boardroom fighting for contracts. He was wearing swim trunks, barefoot, a book in one hand, and a glass of iced tea in the other. This was the version of himself he wished more people saw. The man who liked to read biographies, not just the entrepreneur who built a renewable energy company from the ground up. Then came the sound, the faint screech of a metal latch. The side gate of his yard wasn't locked. It didn't need to be, not in this gated neighborhood where homeowners prided themselves on safety. But Anthony looked up from his book when he heard it swing open. 2 men stepped inside. They weren't dressed like landscapers, and they weren't neighbors dropping by to say hello. Both wore navy polo shirts with cheap iron-on patches, the kind you'd see on clearance racks in a party store. Clipped to their belts were flimsy badges, silver circles that caught the sun, but nothing about them looked official. One of the men, tall and broad-shouldered with thinning blonde hair, scanned the backyard as if he owned it. The other, shorter with a flushed face and sharp eyes, kept his hands on his hips like he was ready to write a ticket. Anthony stayed seated but lowered his book. "Can I help you?" The taller man spoke first. "We're with HOA security. You need to verify you're supposed to be here." Anthony blinked. "Excuse me?" The shorter one stepped closer, his voice carrying the kind of confidence people get when they believe no one will challenge them. "We've had reports of unauthorized use of the pool. I need to see proof you live here." Anthony let out a quiet laugh. "You walked into my yard, through my gate, and now you're asking me to prove I belong here?" The taller man straightened. "Policy requires—" "Policy," Anthony cut in. "Show me your IDS. Let's start there." The shorter one shifted. "We don't need to show you anything." "We're authorized by the HOA board," Anthony studied them. Their shirts didn't match, their badges looked like toys, and neither carried a radio or clipboard. He'd been to enough HOA meetings to know the board didn't employ security. The community already had contracted patrols from an outside company. These 2 weren't them. "I'm not showing you anything until you prove who you are," Anthony said. The taller man, whose name Anthony would later learn was Clinton Marlowe, leaned forward. "Look, we're trying to keep this neighborhood safe. If you've got nothing to hide, you'll just show us some ID." Anthony's calm expression didn't change. "Safe from what? From a man sitting at his pool?" The shorter man, Russell Fain, crossed his arms. "Don't play games. We can call the board right now and have you escorted out." Anthony's jaw flexed, but he kept his tone even. "You'd have me escorted out of my own property? That's interesting." The silence that followed was heavy, only broken by the faint splashing of the pool filter. Anthony could feel his chest tighten, but he forced himself to breathe slow. He knew what this was. He'd built his business in boardrooms where he was the only black man at the table, where every idea he pitched was scrutinized twice as hard. He recognized the suspicion in their eyes, the kind that said no matter how big your house is, some people still can't imagine you belong. But Anthony wasn't about to be bullied in his backyard. He stood, placed his book carefully on the lounge chair, and looked at both men. "Here's what's going to happen. Either you leave right now, or you show me official credentials, because what you're doing looks a whole lot like harassment." Clinton smirked. "Big words. You think you're intimidating us? We've been watching this neighborhood a long time. We know who belongs and who doesn't." Russell added, "So what's it gonna be? You gonna make this easy, or do we have to escalate it?" Anthony could feel the anger pressing against his composure, but he also knew anger wouldn't win. He had another plan forming, One that would not only expose them, but make sure everyone else in the community saw exactly what kind of men they were. But before he made his move, Anthony wanted to hear just how far these two would go. Anthony stayed on his feet, his shadow stretching across the concrete toward the two men. His pulse had picked up, but his voice stayed steady. He knew that if he gave them the show they wanted, anger, shouting, or even a single raised hand, they would twist it. Instead, he wanted their words, every single one of them. Clinton Marlowe, the taller of the two, lifted his chin as if he'd just been challenged to a duel. "We're not leaving." "Not until you prove you belong here." Anthony's lips curved into a thin line. "So you break into my yard, interrupt my Saturday, and then tell me I'm the one who needs to prove something." "That's interesting logic." Russell Fane's face turned redder. He jabbed a finger toward the house behind Anthony. "Anyone can break into a property. Anyone can squat here for a weekend. We've seen it before." Anthony tilted his head. "And you think squatters read hardback biographies by the pool?" The comment caught Russell off guard, but Clinton quickly filled the silence. "We've had complaints. Neighbors worried about people who don't look like they belong. We take those complaints seriously." Anthony's eyes narrowed. "Neighbors? Which ones?" Clinton hesitated. He wasn't expecting the pushback. "That's confidential." Anthony laughed, sharp and humorless. "Confidential? Let me explain how this works. You're standing in my backyard. If you can't tell me who you represent, then you represent no one." Russell's tone rose. "Don't get smart with us. We're the ones in charge here." Anthony leaned forward slightly. "In charge? Of what? Pretending to be cops?" The words hung heavy in the humid air. Russell's nostrils flared, but Clinton raised a hand as if to calm him. "Look, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just show us a driver's license with this address. Then we'll be out of your hair." Anthony reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately. For a moment, the men's eyes lit up like they'd won. But instead of pulling out his wallet, Anthony retrieved his phone. "I'll tell you what," he said, tapping the screen. "I'll give you exactly what you're asking for. Proof." "But not the kind you expected," Russell scoffed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Anthony's thumbs moved quickly. He opened the HOA community portal, the same app homeowners use to pay dues, vote on bylaws, and stream neighborhood updates. With 2 more taps, he activated the live broadcast feature. The red live icon glowed at the top of his phone. "Gentlemen," Anthony said calmly, angling the camera toward them, "you're being recorded and streamed right now to every board member and neighbor in this community. So why don't you go ahead and explain your authority? Right here, for everyone watching." Clinton's posture stiffened. He glanced at Russell, who looked suddenly uncertain. Russell tried to recover. "Fine. Yeah, we're on HOA business. Just doing what needs to be done." Anthony moved the camera closer. "Show them your badges. Make sure they can read them." Clinton held up his shiny circle reluctantly. It had no HOA emblem, no serial number, nothing but a cheap, reflective surface. Russell lifted his as well, his hand trembling slightly. Anthony spoke clearly for the viewers. "These 2 men walked into my yard claiming to be HOA security. They demanded I prove I live here. What do you think of that?" On the screen, comments began to pour in. Anthony could see them flickering. "That's not real security. Who are these guys? We don't have HOA cops. What's going on?" Russell peered at the phone, his face paling. "You think anyone cares about your little stunt?" Anthony raised an eyebrow. "They care. Trust me," Clinton barked. "Turn that off." Anthony shook his head slowly. "No, you wanted proof. Well, now the whole neighborhood has proof of you." For a brief moment, none of them spoke. The breeze rippled across the pool, carrying the faint scent of chlorine. Anthony could feel his neighbors' eyes on him, even though they weren't physically there. The live stream was his shield, his witness. Russell muttered, "This is harassment against us." Anthony almost smiled. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing." Clinton took a step back, his confidence cracking. "Look, maybe we came on too strong. No harm done." Anthony pointed at the phone. "Tell them that, not me." But Anthony wasn't satisfied with their half-hearted backpedaling. He could sense something bigger brewing here. This wasn't just about his yard. It was about what they thought gave them the right to confront him in the first place. But before he pushed further, Anthony wanted to let their arrogance dig the hole even deeper. The air around the pool grew heavier, as if every sound, the buzzing cicadas in the trees, the faint splash of water against the tiles, was waiting for the next word to be spoken. Anthony kept the phone angled just right, his neighbors still chiming in through the HOA portal. The comments weren't slowing down. Some defended him outright. Others expressed shock. A few demanded that Clinton and Russell leave immediately. Clinton Marlowe squinted at the screen, clearly realizing he'd underestimated how quickly the situation had turned. He gestured with a stiff hand toward Anthony's house. "This isn't necessary. You're making a scene." Anthony's eyes didn't leave his. "I didn't open that gate." "You did. The scene is yours." Russell Fane stepped closer, his sneakers squeaking against the stone patio. His face had gone from flushed to almost purple. "Put that phone down. You don't get to broadcast me without my consent." Anthony lifted an eyebrow. "You walked into my property uninvited." "Consent left when you did that." The comment feed lit up again, messages scrolling faster now. "Anthony, keep recording. I'm on the board. We never approved any patrols. Call the police. This has gone too far." Clinton's jaw worked. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cell phone. "You want to play games? Fine. I'll call the HOA president right now." Anthony's voice dropped. Calm but sharp. "Good. Call her. Let her know you're trespassing in my yard, pretending to be law enforcement." Russell barked a laugh, though it sounded forced. "You think anyone's going to take your word over ours?" "We've lived here longer than you." That sentence carried weight. Anthony felt it like a stone skipping across water, not sinking but leaving ripples behind. Longer than you. It wasn't about rules or safety. It was about ownership of belonging, who had earned the right to be there and who hadn't. Anthony spoke clearly for both the men and the live stream. "So that's the real reason you're here. You don't believe I belong because my name isn't on your little golf buddies list. Am I hearing that right?" Clinton stiffened. "Don't twist this." "I'm not twisting anything," Anthony replied. "I'm asking you to say it plainly. You're telling me that because you've lived here longer, you get to decide who fits in?" Russell's mouth opened, then shut. For a moment, the bluster drained from him, but then he snapped back. "You're trying to make us look bad. That's all this is." Anthony held his phone higher, framing them both. "You don't need my help for that." Clinton turned his back slightly, muttering into his phone. "Yeah, we've got a situation here. At the Greer property. He's being aggressive." Anthony cut him off quickly. "Aggressive? I'm sitting by my pool while you storm in uninvited, and I'm aggressive?" He made sure the camera caught every word. The live comments came harder, angrier. "Clinton, stop lying. We're watching this in real time." Anthony's been nothing but calm. "You're finished. Both of you." Russell glanced at the feed, finally realizing how badly this was going. His hands twitched at his sides. "We can still settle this. Just stop streaming and show us proof. No one else has to get involved." Anthony let the silence stretch before answering. "No, everyone's already involved, and they should be." Clinton slammed his palm against the patio table, rattling Anthony's glass of iced tea. "Enough? We don't need this drama. Either you comply or we escalate." Anthony leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering but growing stronger. "Escalate to what? You going to throw me out of my own yard? You going to drag me off while my neighbors watch?" The question landed like a punch neither man could dodge. Russell swallowed hard. Clinton looked away, pretending to check his phone again, but his confidence was leaking. Anthony kept speaking, deliberate and steady. "This isn't about safety. It's about power. You thought you could walk in here, talk loud and scare me into handing you control. But control is gone. You lost it the moment I hit live." The weight of his words settled over the three of them, the pool shimmering behind Anthony like a backdrop to a stage neither of the intruders had prepared for. Russell shifted from one foot to the other, his sneakers scraping against the stone. "This is going to get messy. You'll regret this." Anthony met his eyes. "The only people regretting something today are standing in front of me." And with that, Anthony adjusted his grip on the phone, steady as a rock, ready to push this conflict into the open even further. But before the police arrived, the neighborhood itself had something to say. Anthony's thumb hovered above the screen as more neighbors poured into the live stream. The counter ticked upward, first 20 viewers, then 40, then past 60. Every homeowner who received the push notification now had a front row seat to what was happening in his backyard. He angled the phone just enough so both Clinton Marlowe and Russell Fane were in full view. Their matching polo shirts didn't look so official under the midday sun, especially now that people were commenting non-stop about how fake the badges looked. One neighbor typed, "Those aren't HOA security uniforms. We don't even hire internal patrols. Who are you trying to fool?" Another wrote, "Anthony, I'm calling the real board right now. Keep streaming." Anthony could feel the tide shifting. He wasn't just standing against two men anymore. The entire neighborhood was watching the performance, and the spotlight burned bright. He decided to push it further. "Clinton Russell," he said firmly. "You wanted me to prove I belong here. I'm going to do that right now." Anthony flipped the camera around and walked toward the sliding glass doors. With one hand, he unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stepped into his home. The live stream followed him past the open-concept kitchen, with its granite counters and floor-to-ceiling windows, and into his office. He pulled open the top drawer of his desk and held up a thick folder. "Here's my closing statement from last year. Signed by the HOA president herself. Here's the deed, with my name printed on every page. And here," he held his driver's license to the lens, "is my photo, my name, and this exact address. Proof enough for you?" The comments section exploded. "Crystal clear. That's ownership right there. Anthony doesn't owe you a thing. Leave his property immediately. This is embarrassing for you, Clinton and Russell. Walk away." Anthony turned the camera back to the backyard. Clinton and Russell were still standing by the pool, but their shoulders had slumped. Clinton's phone was pressed to his ear, though it was obvious from his expression that no one on the other end was backing him up. Russell barked, "That doesn't prove anything." "Papers can be faked." Anthony raised his eyebrows. "Deeds, licenses, contracts, photos, all faked? That's a stretch even for you." Russell's voice cracked as he shouted, "This doesn't mean you're safe from consequences." Anthony stopped in the doorway, holding the camera steady. "Consequences? For sitting at my pool with a book? No, gentlemen. The only consequences today are yours, and everyone's watching them live." Clinton finally lowered his phone, clearly out of moves. He shifted uncomfortably and muttered, "You're making too big a deal out of this." "We were just checking in." Anthony locked his eyes on Clinton. "You weren't checking in. You were checking me. You wanted me to feel small in my own yard, and you thought no one would ever hold you accountable." The comments poured harder now, like a flood. Exactly. This was intimidation. "The HOA board will need to respond to this formally. Anthony handled this better than anyone else could have." "Respect," Russell finally snapped. He stepped forward and jabbed his finger in Anthony's direction. "You think this makes you some kind of hero? You're just stirring trouble where there didn't need to be any." Anthony kept his voice even. "I didn't open that gate. You did. And now you don't get to choose whether it becomes trouble or not. You made that choice the moment you put on those fake badges." For a split second, Clinton looked like he might try to apologize, but his pride clamped his mouth shut. Instead, he muttered something under his breath and turned toward the gate. Russell, however, wasn't ready to give up. He stayed rooted to the spot, jaw clenched, chest heaving. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and simmering. Anthony shifted the phone closer to capture him. "Say that again. Let the neighborhood hear you." Russell glared at the lens but said nothing more. The silence dragged out, broken only when Anthony's phone buzzed with a notification. The HOA president herself had entered the chat. Her message was simple. "Anthony, we've called the police. Stay live until they arrive." Anthony lifted his eyes back to the two men. "Looks like the board disagrees with you. Help is on the way." Clinton's shoulders sagged further. Russell finally took a step back. They both seemed to shrink under the weight of hundreds of unseen eyes. Anthony returned to his lounge chair, sat down, and set his book back on his lap. He didn't even glance at the men. His voice was calm, but his words cut sharp. "You can stand there until the officers arrive. or you can leave now and face them later. Either way, this doesn't end the way you thought it would, neither man replied. The pool water shimmered in the sunlight, as if mocking their failed performance. But the neighborhood wasn't done watching, and what came next would leave no room for excuses. Anthony leaned back in his chair, phone angled toward Clinton and Russell, while the live stream ticked past 100 viewers. What had started as a quiet Saturday by the pool was now the biggest event in the neighborhood. Every resident with the HOA app was tuning in. Some were watching from their kitchens, others from lakefront patios, and a few from miles away on vacation. But they were all there, commenting, reacting, and judging. Anthony scrolled briefly to glance at the feed. The names were familiar. Homeowners he'd waved to while jogging in the mornings, parents he'd seen shepherding kids to the school bus at the neighborhood entrance, retirees who spent their evenings walking dogs along the winding streets, and their messages left no room for interpretation. "This is outrageous. Clinton, Russell, what are you thinking?" "Anthony, don't stop streaming. You're handling this perfectly. We need an emergency HOA meeting after this." "I've lived here 15 years, never seen anything like it." Anthony spoke to the phone, his tone steady but laced with steel. "Neighbors, you can see what's happening in real time." 2 men walked into my yard uninvited, claimed they were HOA security, and demanded proof that I live here. Now, even after seeing documentation, they're still standing here. The comments spiked again. Clinton's face flushed as he noticed lines of text calling him out by name. He turned sharply toward the camera. "You all don't understand. We were only looking out for the community." Anthony lifted the phone closer to him. "Then why lie about being security?" "Why the badges? Why demand my ID like you're law enforcement?" Russell interjected, his voice sharp. "Because people are worried. They've said things." Anthony cut him off, eyes narrowing. "Which people? Say their names." Russell hesitated. The silence stretched too long, and the live stream audience noticed. "If you can't name a neighbor, you're lying. This is targeted harassment. Anthony deserves an apology." Clinton snapped, "We don't have to answer to your little audience." Anthony raised his voice slightly, addressing the phone. "They don't want to answer you, neighbors. They don't want to admit this isn't about safety. This is about control." The response was immediate. "He's right. Unacceptable behavior. You're damaging the reputation of all of us." Russell took a step forward, hands trembling at his sides. "Turn it off. End the stream now. You've embarrassed us enough." Anthony's tone sharpened. "No. This is bigger than embarrassment. This is truth. If I turn it off, you get to pretend it never happened. But this is happening, right here, right now, for everyone to see." The men shifted uncomfortably. Anthony noticed Clinton checking his phone again, no doubt seeing his own name blow up on text chains and group chats throughout the neighborhood. It was no longer a private mistake. It was a public stain. Anthony took a sip of his iced tea, never lowering the camera. "Here's the irony, gentlemen. You wanted to put me on trial in my own backyard. Instead, you put yourselves on trial, and the jury is your entire community." The feed filled with emojis, clapping hands and words of agreement. Some neighbors even started tagging the HOA president directly, demanding action. Anthony leaned forward. "To everyone watching, I don't want a fight with my neighbors. I moved here for peace, for family, for community. But peace only works when it's built on respect. And respect doesn't look like strangers walking through your gate pretending to be cops." Clinton finally snapped. He waved his arms in frustration. "You think you've won something here? All you've done is divide this neighborhood." Anthony kept the camera steady. "No, Clinton. You divided it the moment you decided you could play authority over me. I'm just showing people what it looks like." Russell looked down at the ground, avoiding the lens. His bravado had drained away, leaving only discomfort. He muttered, "This isn't fair." Anthony's reply was sharp. "Fair is me sitting by my pool in peace, not being accused in my own yard. Fair is you minding your business like every other homeowner here." The live stream exploded with support. "Anthony, you don't owe them an ounce of courtesy. They've embarrassed the HOA. They need consequences. Stay live until the cops get there. Don't let them wiggle out of it." Anthony angled the phone so both men's faces were framed against the shimmering pool. "Neighbors, I'll stay live. You'll see how this ends." For the first time since the confrontation began, Clinton and Russell both looked smaller, stripped of the authority they had tried to steal. They weren't security guards, they weren't law enforcement, and they weren't in charge. They were just two men cornered by the truth. But the truth was about to arrive in a different form, on four wheels with flashing lights. The hum of tires on asphalt broke the thick silence before anyone else spoke. Anthony's ears caught it first, the low roll of a vehicle pulling onto his street. He angled the phone slightly, capturing the faint reflection of red and blue lights bouncing against the white siding of his house. The comments on the live stream lit up at once. "The cops are here. Good. Let's see how Clinton and Russell handle this." "Anthony, stay calm. You've got all the proof you need." Clinton Marlowe's head snapped toward the gate, his face draining of color. "This is unnecessary," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Russell Fane looked even worse. His shoulders sagged, his jaw working as though he were chewing rocks. Anthony remained seated by the pool, sipping his drink with deliberate calm. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "our guests have arrived. I suggest you gather your thoughts before they come through that gate." The side gate creaked again, this time opening to reveal two uniformed officers. They were from the Cornelius Police Department, one tall and broad with a shaved head, the other lean and younger, scanning the scene with sharp eyes. Both wore bulletproof vests and carried radios clipped to their shoulders, the very image of authority compared to the makeshift costumes Clinton and Russell had thrown together. The taller officer stepped forward. "Afternoon. We received a call about a disturbance at this address." Anthony lifted his phone toward the officers, letting the live stream capture them as well. "Yes, officers. These two gentlemen entered my backyard without permission, claimed to be HOA security, and demanded proof I live here." The officer's eyebrows furrowed. He glanced at Clinton and Russell. "HOA security? The board contracts our department for neighborhood patrols. I'm not aware of any HOA security force." Clinton shifted his weight, his voice cracking as he tried to explain. We were just checking on things, making sure everything was in order." The younger officer's gaze dropped to Clinton's badge. He picked it up between two fingers, studied it, then shook his head. "This isn't an issued badge. Where'd you get it?" Clinton's lips parted, but no words came out. Russell tried to recover, speaking quickly. "Look, we were only doing what's best for the neighborhood. We didn't mean any harm." Anthony interrupted, his tone sharp but controlled. "They threatened me, said they'd call the board to have me removed from my own home. That's not looking out for the neighborhood. That's intimidation." The live stream comments poured in again. "Exactly. Intimidation. Officers, please do something about this. They've embarrassed the whole HOA." The taller officer looked at Anthony. "Do you have proof of residency, sir?" Anthony lifted the folder still sitting on the patio table. "I already showed it on the live stream. My deed, driver's license, everything. But I'm happy to hand it to you as well." He opened the folder, passing over the documents. The officer scanned them quickly, nodding. "All in order," he confirmed. "This is your property." Anthony's eyes flicked to Clinton and Russell. "Anything else you'd like to challenge?" Neither man spoke. The younger officer addressed them directly. "Gentlemen, impersonating security personnel is a serious matter. Entering private property without permission is trespassing. And making false claims of authority? That can carry consequences." Russell's hands twitched. "We weren't impersonating. We just—" The taller officer cut him off. "You wore badges. You claimed to be security. That's impersonation. Do you want me to call the board myself to verify?" Russell deflated, his voice dropping to a whisper. "No." Clinton's mouth pressed into a thin line. He didn't answer at all. Anthony angled the phone back toward the officers. "Neighbors, you heard it. Direct from law enforcement. There was no HOA security. This was all fabricated." The live stream erupted. "Unbelievable. They need to be punished. Anthony, you handled this better than anyone else could. Thank you, officers, for clearing this up." The taller officer gave Anthony a nod. "You have every right to press charges if you wish. At the very least, we'll be filing a report. The HOA board will also receive notification. Anthony glanced at the two men, who now looked smaller than ever, their bravado stripped away. For now, I just want them gone. This is my home, my space. They don't get to invade it again. The officer turned to Clinton and Russell. You heard him. Leave the property now, and consider this your only warning before legal action is taken. Clinton muttered something under his breath, but he grabbed Russell's arm and pulled him toward the gate. Their footsteps echoed against the stone until the latch clicked shut behind them. Anthony let out a slow breath, his shoulders finally loosening. The live stream was still running, neighbors continuing to type furiously, demanding accountability, urging the board to take action. Anthony looked back at the officers. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. The taller officer gave a short nod. We'll be in touch. Make sure you keep a copy of that live stream saved. It might come in handy. Anthony smiled faintly. Already archived. The officers left through the same gate, the patrol car rumbling back down the street. Anthony sat down again, the phone still in his hand. The comments were a blur, but the message was clear. The entire community had witnessed the truth, but the fallout from this encounter was only beginning, and the neighborhood itself was about to erupt. When the police car disappeared down the street, Anthony finally ended the live stream. The screen went dark, but the echo of voices, neighbors typing, officers speaking, imposters stammering, still rang in his ears. He leaned back, staring at the clear water of his pool, knowing the peace he once associated with it was gone for now. But what replaced it was something just as powerful: vindication. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Notifications stacked on top of each other. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages. Some were from neighbors he barely knew, others from people he had only nodded to in passing while collecting his mail. They all wanted to talk now. Anthony let the phone vibrate in his hand, debating whether to answer. Before he could decide, another notification lit up. A message from the HOA president. It read, Anthony, thank you for keeping composure. We're calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow evening. You're invited to attend and speak. Please keep the live stream file. We'll need it. Anthony set the phone down and exhaled. Tomorrow then. The real fight wasn't over. Meanwhile, Clinton Marlowe and Russell Fane weren't slipping quietly into the background. Word of their stunt had spread faster than wildfire. By the time they reached their own driveways, their names were already circulating in group chats and neighborhood Facebook pages. A photo someone had screenshotted from the live stream, Clinton holding up his fake badge, face flushed, was being shared with captions like, "This is who thinks he runs the neighborhood." Inside his home, Clinton paced the living room while his wife sat stiffly on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "They're twisting it," he muttered. "We were just doing what nobody else had the guts to do." His wife looked up, eyes sharp. "You humiliated us. Do you have any idea how this looks? Everyone saw that video. Everyone Russell wasn't faring much better." At his house across the neighborhood, his teenage daughter slammed her bedroom door after screaming, "You embarrassed the whole family!" His wife refused to meet his eyes at dinner, the clink of silverware louder than any words she might have spoken. Russell sat in silence, replaying the confrontation over and over, each time trying to rewrite it in his mind. But the truth was inescapable. Anthony, meanwhile, spent his evening quietly. He reheated leftovers, called his sister to let her know he was all right, and tried to return to his book. But the words blurred together. His mind kept circling back to the look on Clinton's face when the officers confirmed the trespass, to Russell's desperate attempt to salvage authority that never existed. The next day, the emergency HOA meeting drew more attendees than any in recent memory. The community center near the entrance of the neighborhood was packed, residents spilling into the hallway, whispering, buzzing with curiosity and tension. The live stream had united them in outrage, but it also split them into camps. Those who believed Anthony had been wronged, and a small, stubborn few who thought Clinton and Russell had only been looking out for the community. Anthony walked in calmly, folder tucked under his arm, nodding to the board members seated at the long table in front. The HOA president, a woman named Janice Harper, adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. "Thank you everyone for coming on such short notice." We are here to address the events that occurred yesterday afternoon at Mr. Greer's property. The board has reviewed the live stream footage. We want to hear from Mr. Greer first. Anthony stood, scanning the room before speaking. His voice was steady, but each word carried weight. I didn't ask for this confrontation. I was at my pool, minding my business, when two men walked into my yard claiming to be security. They demanded proof I live there. They wore fake badges, pretended to represent this board, and threatened to have me removed from my own home. I stayed calm. I showed my proof. And I made sure the truth was visible to everyone. That's the only reason we're here talking about it honestly today. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, others shifted uncomfortably. Janice gestured toward the other side of the room. Clinton, Russell, you have the floor. Clinton rose first, his face pale. We made a mistake. We thought we were protecting the neighborhood. Maybe we overstepped. But our intentions weren't bad. Russell followed quickly. We weren't trying to intimidate anyone. We thought something was off. That's all. The audience reacted immediately. Some scoffs, a few gasps, and several voices calling out, You lied! You humiliated him! That's not protection! Anthony let the noise settle before he spoke again. This wasn't about intentions. It was about actions. And actions have consequences. The board members exchanged glances. One of them leaned toward the microphone. The board agrees that what happened was unacceptable. While we can't enforce criminal penalties, we can enforce HOA standards. Both Mr. Marlowe and Mr. Fain will face formal sanctions, including fines and suspension of HOA privileges. We also recommend that Mr. Greer file a formal complaint with local authorities if he chooses. The room erupted again, voices overlapping, some satisfied, others angry. Clinton and Russell sat stone-faced, their pride shattered in front of the community they once thought they controlled. Anthony remained calm, hands folded in front of him. I don't need revenge. What I need is respect. What I need is for people to understand that no homeowner here should ever have to justify their existence in their own home. The words landed hard. Even those who had come in skeptical found themselves silent. But this wasn't just about punishment. It was about how the entire community would respond when the dust settled. By the end of the emergency HOA meeting, the neighborhood felt different. People filed out of the community center in small groups, their voices carrying into the night air. Some were angry, some embarrassed, and others just stunned at how quickly a private backyard encounter had become a public reckoning. The live stream had made sure no one could pretend ignorance. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had formed an opinion. Anthony walked back to his car slowly, exchanging quiet nods with a few supportive neighbors. One woman stopped him near the entrance, her grocery bag hanging loosely at her side. Mr. Greer, I just want to say I'm sorry you had to go through that. My husband and I watched the whole stream. You kept calm when I don't think I could have. Anthony gave her a small smile. Thank you. I appreciate that more than you know, but not all comments were supportive. As he reached his car, he overheard a man muttering to his friend. He didn't have to make such a big deal out of it. Could have been handled quietly. Anthony paused, turned, and met the man's eyes. Quiet is how things like this keep happening. Sometimes silence just gives permission. The man looked away without answering. Meanwhile, inside their homes, residents debated late into the night. In living rooms and kitchens, phones buzzed with group texts. Screenshots of the live stream circulated faster than the board could control. Some threads were filled with outrage, neighbors demanding harsher consequences, even removal from the HOA for Clinton and Russell. Other threads leaned toward sympathy, claiming they had simply made a mistake. But those arguments didn't hold up well when someone inevitably dropped the screenshot of Clinton's fake badge or the transcript of Russell insisting Anthony didn't belong. At the Marlowe household, Clinton sat stiffly in his recliner, staring at the muted TV. His wife scrolled silently through Facebook posts filled with angry comments under his name. You can't go to the club this week, she said flatly. People will eat you alive. Clinton clenched his jaw. They'll forget. Give it time. But even as he said it, he knew time wouldn't erase a video saved on dozens of phones. Across the neighborhood, Russell's home wasn't much calmer. His teenage daughter refused to speak to him, embarrassed to show her face at school. His wife's patience had worn thin. "You turned us into a headline, Russell. Our neighbors can't even look at us without thinking about what you did." He slammed his fist on the kitchen table. "I was trying to protect this place." "Protect?" she shot back. "Or prove you still mattered? Because from where I'm sitting, all you protected was your pride." Anthony, on the other hand, sat quietly on his back patio, the same spot where it had all started. The pool shimmered in the moonlight, but instead of calm, it reflected a storm of thoughts. He knew the situation wasn't just about him. It had cracked open a deeper conversation in the neighborhood about bias, power, and the boundaries of authority. He wondered how many of his neighbors had ever felt the need to prove they belonged. The next morning, Anthony checked his inbox. Dozens of messages awaited him. Some were thank yous for standing his ground. Others were apologies from neighbors who admitted they hadn't spoken up soon enough in the past. A few even asked for a chance to sit down with him over coffee, to get to know him as more than the man with the nice house by the lake. Anthony decided to accept some of those invitations. He knew that real change didn't happen in boardrooms or through fines. It happened in conversations, in eye contact across a table, in the slow work of building understanding. Later that week, a group of neighbors invited Anthony to a casual barbecue at the community park. He hesitated at first, wary of token gestures, but he went anyway. Standing there with a paper plate in hand, surrounded by laughter and the smell of grilled corn, he realized something had shifted. People weren't looking at him as an outsider anymore. They were asking about his work, his favorite books, his thoughts on the lake level this season. But while some bonds were strengthening, the undercurrent of tension still existed. Not everyone wanted to see Anthony as part of the community, and he knew it. A handful of neighbors remained distant, their smiles tight, their eyes avoiding his whenever he passed on the walking trail. Anthony wasn't naive. He knew one victory didn't erase years of ingrained suspicion. But it was a start. And sometimes a start was all that was needed to tip the balance. But while the neighborhood struggled with its conscience, Anthony himself was left to reflect on what the ordeal truly meant for him and his family. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet Anthony used to crave after long weeks running his business. Yet now, silence felt different. It wasn't the calm he once associated with his sanctuary by the lake. It was heavier, laced with questions he couldn't push aside. Anthony sat at his dining table late one evening, the live stream still saved on his phone, its file name a stark reminder. HOA incident, June 24th. He hadn't watched the entire recording yet. He didn't need to. The images were burned into his memory, Clinton waving a toy badge, Russell barking demands, and himself sitting steady but simmering, knowing what the confrontation was really about. His sister, Patrice, called him that night. She lived in Raleigh and had heard about the incident from friends who stumbled across clips of the video circulating online. "Anthony," she said, her voice firm but concerned, "are you okay?" "I'm fine," he answered, though his tone was flat. "It's not the first time I've been questioned for existing where I'm supposed to be," Patrice sighed. "You shouldn't have to say that. Not after all the work you've done to build your life. A house like that, a business like yours, you earned it, and still they look at you like you're trespassing." Anthony rubbed his temples. "I know, but getting angry wouldn't have changed a thing. If I'd raised my voice, they'd have spun it as me being threatening. That live stream was my only shield." "That live stream," Patrice said softly, "might have saved you." The thought stayed with him after their call ended. He replayed the moment in his mind when he had lifted the phone, hit live, and watched the tide turn. It was such a simple gesture, yet it transformed everything. Proof had power, not because it convinced Clinton and Russell, but because it exposed them to the world around them. The next morning, Anthony walked the path along the lake with his dog, Baxter, a golden retriever who greeted every jogger and walker like an old friend. Anthony noticed more people stopping to say hello than before. Some neighbors seemed eager to show friendliness, others cautiously polite. He could feel the weight of the incident in their glances, even in their kindness. It was as if they were silently asking him to forgive what had happened on behalf of the entire neighborhood. That afternoon, Anthony sat by the pool again, his book open but unread. He thought about how quickly peace could be stolen, how fragile belonging could feel, even in a house you built yourself. He thought about Clinton and Russell, their anger, their pride, their refusal to admit what they had really done. What drove someone to cross a line like that? Was it fear? Was it entitlement? Or was it simply habit? A belief so ingrained they didn't even recognize it as bias. Anthony's thoughts drifted back to something his late father once told him. "Son, there will always be people who measure you against their own comfort instead of your character. You don't win by shouting louder. You win by making the truth impossible to ignore." He finally understood the full weight of those words. Later that week, Anthony was invited to speak informally at a small community gathering organized by a few board members. It wasn't an official HOA meeting, just a chance for neighbors to listen. Anthony didn't prepare a speech. Instead, he spoke plainly, like he was talking to a friend. "I moved here because I wanted peace. I wanted a safe place for my family, and I wanted to be part of this community. But peace doesn't come from gates or rules. It comes from respect. The day Clinton and Russell walked into my yard, I could have yelled, I could have reacted in anger. But I didn't, because I knew that wouldn't fix anything. What fixed it was proof, patience, and the truth. And I hope none of us forgets that." The room was quiet when he finished. Some people nodded. A few even clapped softly. Anthony didn't need applause. He needed understanding. That night, as he closed the sliding glass door and turned off the patio lights, he realized something important. This incident wasn't just a personal victory. It was a mirror, held up to an entire neighborhood, forcing people to confront things they might have ignored otherwise. And for Anthony, that was enough. But the lesson wasn't complete until he put it into words everyone could carry with them. Neighbors, strangers, anyone who might one day face the same challenge. Anthony sat at his kitchen table late one evening, a notepad in front of him. He wasn't a man who journaled often, but some things needed to be written down. He wrote slowly, letting the pen scratch across the paper as if each word carried weight. Respect cannot be demanded through force. It is earned through honesty and lost through arrogance. He thought about how quickly his Saturday by the pool had transformed. One moment, he was a man with a book and a glass of iced tea. The next, he was the target of two neighbors who believed they could police him. That single moment reminded him that peace is fragile, but also that composure is powerful. The next weekend, Anthony invited his sister Patrice and her kids to visit. They splashed in the pool, grilled burgers on the patio, and laughed late into the night. At one point, his nephew asked, "Uncle Anthony, is this the pool where those fake cops came?" The question was innocent, but it pierced him. He bent down, meeting the boy's eyes. "Yes," Anthony said. "This is where it happened. But this is also where we had fun today. That's what matters. You don't let people steal your joy." The boy smiled, nodding, before cannonballing back into the water. Anthony sat back in his chair, watching the ripples fade, realizing that resilience was more than standing up in the moment. It was refusing to let bitterness win afterward. Meanwhile, Clinton Marlowe and Russell Fane had retreated into shadows of embarrassment. Neither showed their faces at the neighborhood clubhouse for weeks. Their names were still whispered on sidewalks, their reputations stained by screenshots and retellings of the live stream. They had tried to position themselves as authority figures, but now they were examples, a warning of what happens when pride and prejudice collide. Anthony didn't celebrate their downfall. He didn't need to. Their punishment came not from him, but from their own choices, played out under the eyes of the very community they claimed to protect. He did, however, take satisfaction in knowing he had chosen the right path. He could have yelled. He could have escalated. He could have let anger become the headline, but he hadn't. Instead, he had shown his neighbors that truth doesn't need theatrics. It only needs light. In the weeks that followed, Anthony noticed more neighbors reaching out. Some came by just to shake his hand. Others asked about his business, genuinely curious for the first time. A few even admitted their silence during the live stream, shamed them into reconsidering what community really meant. Anthony welcomed the conversations, even the uncomfortable ones, because each one chipped away at the wall that had made him feel like an outsider in his own neighborhood. One evening, Anthony stood by the pool alone again, the same book resting on the chair beside him. He looked at the water reflecting the sky, calm and undisturbed, and realized he no longer saw the confrontation when he looked there. He saw choice. His choice to keep steady. His choice to record. His choice to let the truth stand on its own legs. He smiled faintly, whispering words his father once told him. The sharpest weapon isn't force, it's proof. And that's what he wanted his neighbors, and anyone hearing his story, to remember. In a world where false authority can knock at your gate, where suspicion can walk through your door disguised as concern, the most powerful move you can make is not losing yourself. It's standing firm, showing truth, and refusing to be diminished. Because authority borrowed without permission always collapses. But dignity, when guarded, can't be touched. So if you take anything away from Anthony Greer's story, let it be this. When challenged unfairly, don't rush to fight on their terms. Show your truth. Let it speak louder than their accusations. And protect your peace. Because that's something no imposter can ever own. If this story resonated with you, if you believe respect should never be conditional and dignity should never be questioned, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this one. Stories that don't just entertain, but remind us of the power of patience, proof, and perseverance. Because sometimes the strongest move you can make is the one that proves you never had to move at all.